Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're always about the positive vibes here on the show, and with me right now, I've got a very special guest. He has worked for numerous companies, including the WWE, WCW, SMW, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and former heavyweight champion of Smoky Mountain Wrestling. I'm pleased to welcome the one, the only, Bobby Blaze. Welcome, Bobby, to Wrestling with Heart.
Hey, man, it's a pleasure to be here. What a great introduction. Thank you for the kind words. And I'm honored to be here. I've been looking forward to this, so thank you.
Yes, it's my pleasure. So let's talk about your childhood. Where are you from?
So it's kind of weird. Ashton, Kentucky is where I was born at. And within a few months of being born, I went to Baltimore, Maryland. So I lived in Baltimore until I was almost 7 years old. Then we came back to Kentucky, and that's my home. That's where I'm really from. Ashton, Kentucky is what I tell people. I've lived in several other cities, for wrestling purposes, and enjoyed that. But as a child, I mentioned that story particularly because the first wrestling I was introduced to sports were like the Baltimore Colts and the Baltimore Orioles. But I had both my grandmothers at the time lived in Maryland, and both of them were wrestling fans. And I had aunts, a couple aunts that were really big wrestling fans. They would have been right out of high school maybe. And so I got to watch the old WWF on a big panel TV, man, but it was color. This is probably like 68 and 69, those times that I got to watch that. When it came to Kentucky, I'd kind of forgotten about it, and I was about 9 or 10 years old and was playing outside one day. My little brother came running outside and said, Robert, you got to see this. He was all excited, and I ran in the house like, what are you talking about? And I caught the tail end. They just come back from a commercial break of the Memphis Wrestling. Of course, I didn't know it was Memphis Wrestling. All it was, he kept telling about this guy that was doing a split, and he pinned a guy and won. But they were showing like some highlights as it was going off. And I said, oh, man, that's pro wrestling. I said, I used to watch that. And he goes, I don't know what I was watching. There's two men fighting. Anyway, he started telling me. So we started trying to find it every Saturday because it was recorded. It was live out of Memphis, but it went to Lexington, the station we got there. And so finally, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks later, we got to watch, Memphis Wrestling for the first time. And the thing he was trying to tell me about, and I've told Bill Dundee this before, is Bill Dundee, the superstar Bill Dundee, done a sunset flip and pinned a guy. And that was like the biggest move. And my brother, he's a little bit shorter, and that's who he identified with that superstar Bill Dundee. And I was hooked. Like I said, probably 9 years old. And I know that because my mother hadn't remarried at that time. And it was my brother and myself and lived in this apartment. We had this little TV, black and white TV to tell the time there, aged myself a little bit. But, man, we watched it every week. And then we found out there was a local wrestling, the Scuffling Hillbillies, Chuck Conley and Rip Collins. They were from this area, and they ran a little promotion at the National Guard Armory. Well, I grew up right downtown beside McDonald's and my junior high school and a dairy and a tannery, and right there in the middle is the National Guard Armory. I'm like 2 blocks away if you take a shortcut, 5 if you have to go around. And every time wrestling came, man, my brother and I, we were over there. And by the time I was in 6th grade, when I was 12, that summer of turning 13, we started setting the ring up every time they came to town. That's that typical story, the old Bobby Eaton story, hang around, kid, But the guys got to know us because of one, when I said my junior high, was for reason for that. There was a gas station right on the other side of that, and Cokes were like a quarter. We run up to, they had like 10 Coke machines out there for all the kids, and traffic, I'm sure. But, man, we ran up here and get them a Coke, or we run to McDonald's and get them a coffee. And we just kind of got to know. And the crew at that time, once Chuck and them stopped bringing some people in, ICW started coming. So by this time, I'm getting like 14, 15, and really getting into it. And Memphis did come one time only here. But also now, as I get to be 16, and some of my buddies are starting to drive because they're 17 and 18, I start going to shows in Huntington, West Virginia, Charleston, West Virginia, Lexington, Kentucky. And so I started getting to, instead of just a local, they started bringing, the NWA was popular around here. And then next thing you know, WWE or F back then, they started coming. And so we started just getting an influx of all kinds of, wrestling companies. And if you could afford it, I was a paper boy, and then I was in college student, and my grandmother would send me some money sometimes, or I'd save up, I'd, do work study. And that was about an hour and a half away rather, from Lexington. So I got to go see Memphis again there, caught back up with this. So I just been a wrestling fan my whole life, man, and got to see a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, seems like you definitely got to be exposed to all different kinds of promotions and
Yes,
wrestlers from all around the country, getting the chance to watch them both in person and on TV. And
yes,
you mentioned Memphis wrestling. I think it's so fascinating that um, just a who's who of people came through that area. And not to mention the amount of characters that came through that area as well. You had Bill
absolutely.
Dundee, you had Jerry Lawler, Jackie Fargo, just so many people coming through that area, and just they were celebrities.
Oh yeah,
They were. They
big
really
time,
were.
big time. Yeah, they were. When I got to work for Smoky Mountain Wrestling, a dirty white boy told me one time, we was in a holler up in Kentucky somewhere, and I was just in Hazard, Kentucky a couple of weeks ago, and they have a big, powerful TV station there. So Smoky Mountain was on it every, Saturday or Sunday or both, from my understanding, for over 3 years. Anyway, he told me one time down there, he said, man, and I wasn't used to, I'd always worked the heel, and I'd been traveling overseas. I was up in Canada. And when you're there, I was a baby face, and he goes, "Man, you are the closest these people get to meeting a TV star or a movie star." And that's the way it was when I was a kid. Them guys, when they come to town, I mean, going to Rupp Arena and standing and looking over there where you could see 10 feet away in the walkway, there's Jerry the King Lawler, and I'm like, and other than come out and give you the high fives and all that, I used to talk to Bobby Eaton all the time in Huntington, even before I got into business. He was such a sweetheart of a guy. And, I just kind of always give Corny the office, like, because Bobby was cool to me. And Jimmy didn't try to hit me with a racket or anything, But little did I know, I wanted to, be working in that business one day. And that, Jimmy would be the one that gave my first break in the U.S. But yeah, a lot of those guys, especially Memphis, man, my goodness, them guys were wide open superstars, man. And they, every different night, Louisville, Evansville, Nashville, Memphis, they had the whole spot show here, there.
Mm-hmm.
It was over, it was over. And of course, Lawler was the king, and they brought in, back then, handsome Jimmy Valiant came in and had a heck of a good run. Austin Idol came in, he had that universal heartthrob, the Las Vegas leg lock daddy, and all those characters that came in through there. It was tremendous. It was tremendous. Watch.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think around 84, it might have been 85-ish, but around 84, latter part, the old ICW, Macho Man and them, they invaded Memphis. And man, when that happened, again, this is my second year of school, university, and they put it in Lexington paper, the Lexington, Kentucky newspaper, and then you see the angle on TV, and then the magazines, and so we were finally, because it's kind of like I wouldn't say it then because I didn't know it, but like Bush League or Outlaw, whatever would be, and they invaded here, coming in to take over with Lawler working with Macho Man and Lanny and all of them coming in, man, and all those. And you start seeing the other talent too going to like WWE and showing up, or F, of course, back then, showing up on the TV or WCW, NWA, and you're like, man, that guy used to work. He's incredible. A guy like Rip Rogers, maybe you'd see him on a an NWA show and having another spot, and Pez Watley. the talent that ICW had. They had Bob Orton Jr., the great Boris Malenko. So they had, and Ronnie Garvin, of course, who ended up going to NWA and, eventually WWF. But so all the talent that I got to see on TV before they blew up, man. And it wasn't until the latter part, I think, of '84 that it might have been '85. We started getting the USA Network and started getting we got Tuesday Night Titans, I think it was, for WWF.
Cable television really started to take over at that time.
Yeah, and then we started getting maybe right that same year, mid '80s again. ESPN started airing the
World Class.
World Class. So then you had that, man. So it was, and again, some of those guys only saw them in magazines. Might have seen them come through a territory, not know who they were or something, but you knew them through the magazines and through other wrestling fans. And wrestling fans are such a unique crowd of people anyway, because you'd watch wrestling on that weekend. This is way back before the internet, and sometimes picked up the phone wasn't even an option. You just had to wait till Monday morning, get to school, and say, "Man, did you see this?" And then you talk wrestling. You knew kind of who the wrestling fans were, because you may have even seen them at the matches on that Saturday, And that was the thing about our local area at our armory. When you went down there, man, it was we had a diversification, okay? Blacks, whites, Hispanics, rich, poor. We went there because you didn't worry about school, who you hung out with. You was at wrestling. Because I hang out the basketball or football players. That was my kick, But at the wrestling, and could have been a cheerleader over there. It could have been an old black guy lived down the street from you to deliver newspapers to. But man, when you got there, we was all family, wrestling family. That's just the way the fans were, still are. Fans of wrestling. It's something you have in common, and it brings everyone together. I wrote a little story about it called Yard Time. Wrestling transcends everything. It really does. I ran a show at a prison. It was called Yard Time. Is a story, and what it was, the inmates, and as a federal prison, they segregated themselves: blacks, whites, Hispanics, like that. But and it drew the second biggest crowd out on the yard that prison had. The only one that had outdrawn us. And I'll give you an example. If a gospel group comes, some of the gospel guys are coming. They're religious men. If you bring a rap group in, some whites, but mostly black. I'm not trying to, get racial on. I'm just saying. But see, the biggest star that came out of about 1,200 inmates, about 670 inmates came out of the yard to see Muhammad Ali. He transcends things. People wanted to see Ali. And he was still vocal then, and he could do the shuffle, and he did it out there, and it went crazy. Wrestling, when I brought it in there, we drew about 660. And I got called into the warden's office, and he was congratulating me about, because I was a guard there at the time for about 2 years. And wrestling did the same thing as Ali did. It didn't matter what your race was, what your sexuality was, what your nationality was. It didn't matter. People wanted to see it, And I think we had 6 matches, and it needed those out on the yard free for 2 hours from 1 to 3. It's kind of like the old scene in Shawshank Redemption, man. They weren't prisoners when it was up on that, doing the roof that summer. They were just convicts. They were just guys up there soaking a few suds, just like they would be roofing someone else's home or something. Them guys that come to that wrestling that day, man, they weren't in prison. They were just talking to their prison buddy, and hey, they loved that.
It was an escape. They were entertained by the wrestling. Yes. They wanted to see their favorites. They wanted to go to the show. They wanted to have a good time.
At 4 o'clock, standing count, we had to be out of there by that time. All across the country at 4 o'clock, one of the 5 counts they have in the system. 4 o'clock, you have to be standing, and they can't have anyone unaccountable for, obviously, in a prison. So when I came back in that evening at 4 o'clock, I just had about an hour break or whatever. I came back in as soon as that count cleared, and it's mail time and it's chow time. Them inmates, the unit I was in, I remember I was in a unit, J unit, a barn. They called them barns. They had them. It was 50 people on each side. You're down the middle, and they're in cubicles, not cells. So the barns were. And man, when that count cleared, people to swarm my desk, man. Hey, boss, hey, God. Man, they just started going, that was great. I mean, they stayed jacked up. And my unit that day, I had no problems whatsoever in my unit that day. No fights, nothing was going on. Everyone was still jacked up that had went to that show, and that's all he was talking about, man.
Yeah,
you see it. And the only flack I caught, and I heard it during the show, and you probably have an idea where it's going, was, hey, boss, how come you didn't have any women on that show? How come you didn't bring any, you can't be taking a woman out to a federal, penitentiary and have 2 women matches. You could, but I wasn't about to risk that. That'd be a riot, But that's the only thing. Is why don't you bring some women for us to see wrestle? But I didn't even probably know any at that time, honestly, well enough to trust them enough to say go to this prison. Different then. But that was the only thing. People were like, we wish you'd have brought some women. And the funny thing was, I didn't have to bring a midget because we had an inmate that was essentially a midget from Oklahoma that grew up on Bill Wass's territory. And he was in there for meth or crack or something, crystal meth, I don't. And he was a little nut, but he'd run around, and we had him doing an acting manager's role out there.
It's crazy.
Had a guy that had sparred with a heavyweight Page down Louisville, heavyweight boxer. This guy was a sparring partner with him. Had him be special referee one match. Had a couple black guys that had been DJs out in the streets, had them run the MC stuff. So they got involved, man, and it was a good deal. So that's my story about that being wrestling transcends everything. It could be a hillbilly, it could be a redneck, it could be a big city slicker, it could be a guy, it could be a girl, don't matter what race, doesn't matter. If you like wrestling, it doesn't matter. It brings people together, I think.
It does. And I think now you're starting to see more celebrities get involved. They're going to the shows, they're watching, they're proud of being a fan. So you're right. It has transcended. And I think it's going to continue to transcend for years to come. You had mentioned a bit ago, Boris Malenko. You got your start training under him. At what point did you decide I want to do this?
So I was about 15 years old. I was walking by the TV on the way to a basketball practice, and there's handsome Jimmy cutting a promo on, Jerry Kingfish Lawler and coming to Motown, or Mopo Town as he called it back then. But I said, I'm going to do that one day. I'm going to do that one day. And I just kept going to shows, kind of be redundant, blah, blah, blah. And as I got older, I'd ask people. I stood in Rep Arena and I was like, Hey, King, how do you get in this business? And I always got the same answer. I got the same answer from Don Morocco one time too. Like, see the promoter. Hell, I don't know. See the promoter. So that's one of my running jokes is go see the promoter, and I'd go see someone else. And so it was really, that kayfabe thing was going on. But I had a number for Larry Sharp at the Monster Factory. I saw on the back of a Sports Illustrated with Bam Bam Bigelow. I went up there on an extended weekend. I was teaching school at this point, and I went up there to the Monster Factory. It had a little tryout, if you will, and then I got to spew how much it cost and this and that, and I was like, well, maybe a summer, that's what I'll do. I was willing to move to do it. And then I got some information from a gentleman named Marvin Joel up in Minnesota, and it was all about the Malenko School. So I'd visited Orlando before, and I knew several people there, and I knew a couple of guys that needed a roommate. So I thought, oh, maybe I can do that because that's just 90 miles from Tampa. But I didn't have the money yet. I just and I was at an independent show, and a guy said, hey, and at the time I was, big into bodybuilding and looked pretty decent, and I was really a good athlete. And I'm not bragging. That's just, I accept that now that without, being cocky or arrogant. So he said, man, I train you up here. It was a couple hours away. And anyway, I didn't get smartened up. I got some training, and they had bookings, little shows every weekend, man. And like the same towns that the ICW used to run. Well, after about 3 months of that training, I started getting booked on the weekends. I did about 12 to 15 matches, and it was just this guy and myself would be the third match. It'd be hardcore, and we'd beat each other up in street clothes. And that was my wrestling training. And right around this time of year, I was in Pikeville, Kentucky, at an NWA Southern show. and it was a big fundraiser for the sheriff's department for Toys for Tots and all this. So it's a big community thing, and we did that third match. Well, in the main event, it was supposed to be Jimmy Valiant and Hector Guerrero as Lasertron against Buddy Landell, and I think it was Dutch Mantel, but Dutch didn't show, and I think that's who it was. But anyway, Buddy had seen me work, and we had been talking in our locker room and this and that. And I was already a Buddy fan anyway. He goes, put this young boy here with me, and we'll work it. So I went out in the main event with Buddy Landell against Hector and Jimmy Valiant. And he said, just listen, kid. And as soon as they got up, I got up on the turnbuckle, on the apron, rather, and they started working. I looked and I said, oh, my God, these guys are professional. They know how to work. And I saw through it for the first time a little bit. Like, oh, I should have been doing this instead of getting my brains beat out or beating my buddy's brains out. So I got in the back with Buddy and got through the match, thankfully. And it was really easy. We did the spots. I just listened. And finally, Jimmy hooked me, said, catch him, kid. Lasertron went flying off the top. And in the last second, I put my hands out and caught him. And that was that. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, brother. And I was like, whoa, this is what it's about. So I talked to Buddy, and he said, man, you're just green. You need to get experience. You need to find someone to really train you, And I was like, okay. Well, when I came home, I started contacting Malenko's. And a lady named Phyllis Lee worked there. And I ended up going that summer to Orlando. And I traveled down on the week. I got me a job, traveled down on the weekends. And the first time I met Malenko, went and talked to him. He put me in a ring, and he talked me through a match with another young guy, and then he took me outside. And I could do everything he asked me to do for the most part. And I didn't know, like, on a suplex to help the guy. This guy's in there grunting and groaning. I didn't know how to feed for a body slam or something, But I had the blueprint. And so Malenko said, Bobby, he said, you obviously know a little bit about professional wrestling, but here's what I want you to do. He said, them guys up there in West Virginia and Kentucky and Tennessee, he said, all they want to do is punch and pull hair and gouge eyes. And he said, God bless them. He goes, if you come to me, I'm going to teach you how to wrestle, but you have to forget everything you think you know and start from square one. And he put his hand out, do we have a deal? And I said, yes, sir, we do. And I started going down there. And every time I went, he'd make me do conditioning before I got in the ring, which a lot of Hindu squats, push-ups, called 10 and 1s. You do 10 Hindu squats, 1 push-up, you work your way up and down like a ladder. And then I did that for about 4 months, and a room came open. By this time I started knowing some of the guys that I meet on weekends that lived in the Tampa area and trained, and a room came open. Someone needed a roommate there, and I moved down. And then I went 4 days a week for 4 months straight, every Tuesday and Wednesday and every Saturday and Sunday. And I didn't miss. And I just, and I had paid money, and I had moved like 1,500 miles from home. They knew I was serious, and they saw me working in a ring. That was serious. And so Malenko kind of took me under his wing. After about 4 months, Dean had been going to Japan quite a bit back then. And he wasn't at the school. He had stopped by here and there. But then at that point, Dean started coming in and said, hey, Dad said, I had a partner named Rico, and he said, Dad said you and Rico are doing really good, and he thinks you need to do some more advanced stuff, and I'm here to help you. So Dean took over that part of, here's some more flying stuff, here's some more junior heavyweight stuff, And at that time, I was, pretty lean and could do all that. And that's the rest is history with the Malenkos, man. I love them. And eventually I got to a couple of Sundays, Larry would, when Joe was a pharmacist, and he would come in sometimes before they go to Japan and work on tag team stuff, timing, ring rust. And Rico and myself would get to work out with Joe and Dean Malenko. And of course, unlike now, I just shut up, listened, and done what they told me. And then I learned that, that was because I knew, one of my goals was to be on WTBS one day. I want to be on that Saturday night, wrestling. And then after I was at Tampa for a while, and I saw these Japanese guys coming and going, then Joe and Dean definitely going. And then X-Pac or Sean Watman was one of my roommates at the time. When I'd come in, we always pick them up, hang out. He'd get them Japanese magazines off them guys. And my one goal, my next goal, if I ever get to be on TBS, I'm going to go to Japan. That's where fortunately, I got to go there 5 times for Michinoku Pro, excuse me. But yeah, training at Malenko's was tough back then, man. You had to do a lot of conditioning. Every Sunday morning, we did 500 Hindu squats. Tuesday and Thursday, we'd do 2-3 sets of those 10 and 1s, neck bridges. We ran sprints. A lot of that was Larry, Professor Malenko, would say, here, go do this, and you go and do it. And then sometimes he'd sit there in a chair and watch you do it, But it was very important to him because Carl Gotch was down there some too, and he'd come by on it. They do shoot fighting on Sunday sometimes, way back before the MMA got as popular as it is now. And, you hear something, you see something, you're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And so them guys would say, you got to treat this business like it's real. That's what they did it. That's what it was to them. It's real, So think, shoot, then work. And then you learn, okay, what's realistic? How do you do? And so again, everyone just kind of evolved from let's work from the ground up. Then you start flying. Then you start doing tag team stuff or whatever. I got such an education for the 14 months I was there, and I started getting bookings around the Tampa, around that whole Florida area. When it shows.
It definitely seems like you had such a well-rounded experience learning so much during that time.
Mm-hmm.
Was there anything that they taught you or pieces of advice that you got from the Malenkos that you still apply to today?
Oh, it's just discipline. And that's what I was going to say about Carl and Malenko both. They always say conditioning is your best hold, so get your butt in shape and stay in shape. And, as you get older, that's a bit harder. But Malenko had this saying that's still with me today. And I tell it to when I instruct and help and coach some younger students. Young men should work out, old men must. Well, now I'm one of the old men. I must work out every day. I was talking about my knee there. I just got to keep moving, man. That's the whole key to it. So yeah, those type things stayed with me. Conditioning is your best hold, and young men should work out, old men must. And also just the foundation of having some discipline, having the discipline that, not everyone can get up and just go to the gym. Not everyone can just go, even if it's just a walk, 45 minutes or something for your health. Not everyone's going to do that, but you have to have discipline. They instilled discipline in me that's still with me today. And then also never quit learning. If I'd have stopped learning after I went to the school saying, oh, I graduated from Malenko Wrestling Academy. Well, you never graduate. I got to that first territory and I could do this and do that. And Rico went with me and he could do it. And after 2 weeks, Ron Starr and Leo Burke, Leo was a booker and had been in a car wreck. So he kind of let Ron do it for the first 2 weeks we were there. We were unaware of that at the time. That's what had happened. But they come to us and said, man, guys, you both, and Rico had an incredible body. And they said, you both got really good bodies. You're both athletic. You're young. We'd like to do something with you. But hey, you can do all these moves, every suplex coming and going. They go, but you don't know when to do them. You don't know the psychology. You just go out there and beat these guys up, man. And Rico said, well, that's the way we was taught. And Ron was go, well, you won't stay here very long if you keep beating them up. It's a give and take, and you got to work with them. And it wasn't we hurt anyone, nothing like that. He was thinking, shoot, and trying to do that. These young guys were like, man, we're just here to work. We're trying to learn. So then there was 2 other heels, Eddie Watts and Goldie Rogers. And they said, hey, man, start riding with us and smarten the F up, And they start telling us in the car, okay, here's what you do. And we learned to work, backseat of a car, listening on those road trips over and over. So I went up there a couple of times. And then my point being, never stop learning. And that was one of the things they would say too down there is the day that you stop learning in professional wrestling is the day you're like the bull in the ring. You're dead. Always learn. And so I tell that to my students today, man. We were doing Cornish hypes and we were doing Wizards, Cornish hypes, and fireman carries the other day. And I just kept drilling them on it because I said, I know we done this 2 weeks ago, but I had 2 of my other buddies came down from West Virginia that I had trained many years ago, and they still get there and go at it. And I said, take these young guys and show them how to do these 3 things, So it was really good to get to go back over that stuff again, so they tighten that up and make it better. But
Repetition.
If I had never learned that, So, and yes, repetition, got to get them reps in. That's so important. just a simple lockup, can go wrong. But yeah, repetitions. You're right. Yes, sir.
So you achieved your goals with getting to WCW and in Japan. I mean, talk about a night and day difference.
I love Japan. I really did. I went from Michinoku Pro, which was ran by the great Sasuke, had Grand Hamada there. They had Jinsei Hakushi. They had a young Taka Michinoku, young Sean Fujinora, Fujiwara rather, and Sean Funaki. I'm sorry. Think of all these guys I met while I was there, and the thing is, Willie Wilkinson Jr. was there, and he was a Malenko guy. He was kind of a policeman for the company I worked for. He was kind of the trainer. He had worked under Gotch, so he was kind of the trainer and the coach there. And every tour I went on, there was usually 2 Americans and 2 Mexican wrestlers, and then a regular crew. And I'd go from the shortest time I went was the last time, way back when, was 2 weeks. Usually I went for 4 to 6 weeks. And you're on that tour bus or you're on a train, and every night you're working. And the work there is those guys train for 2 years before they even get a quote exhibition match sometimes, before they can actually then they'll go to Mexico or Canada or somewhere, England, and work for another year, then come back, so they have 3 years experience before they really have their first matches, most of them. And so I got to be there because of the name Malenko. It carried a lot of weight. And the first night in, first of all, it was 2 Mexican guys. One was Superboy and Senor Lino, the Solar Man, was there. And so they were helping me some too with the language and stuff. And they gave me a young boy, really thick, nice, professional looking guy. And he said, you're over, give him a couple things and watch yourself, This guy had these big thighs, kick pads on. And man, he started, whop, whop, whop. But that's what I knew what to expect. And we were working too, though. And so, man, I was like, well, and I used to wear the kick pad. I just gave it back, and then I'd take them down and I'd let them up. And I was like, brother, to myself, I'm getting over here one way or the other because, and he wasn't trying to hurt me. I wasn't trying to hurt him, but it was competitive, And I got the victory. I came back and Hamada said, one of his boys, Hamada said, hey, how'd the young boy do? I said, he done really, really good. He goes, too stiff for you? I said, no. I said, I like that. So let the boys know. Snug's fine with me, And that got me over. And then I started working with Jinsei, who had just come off of New York TV, and he knew American style. And he was about my size, maybe a little bit bigger. With same height, but his muscularity, a little more muscle maturity, if you will. And he could speak very good English when he wanted to. And I had good matches with him. And then eventually Sasuke, before the first tour was over, like, tonight, Bobby, with me. I was nervous, man. I mean, nervous. And we were in his hometown. There's about 2,200 people there. And there's going to be a championship match where, they give you the flowers and everything. And we went out there and tore it down. You just touch Sasuke and he's flying for you. And man, he was going through chairs and over. And then he did his flip, the backflip, what's it called there? Shooting star press. And I caught him outside the ring. And man, he came down like a missile. And I locked my arms around him, and I literally locked. And he's a little bit shorter than me. And at the last second, he was going through me. His costume was really light and slick. He was flying right through me. His head was going to hit that concrete. And I just went back into a bridge and took the bump at the right second because his head just missed that floor. And he gave me the office down on the floor, and I knew that was over. I said, I knew I'd done the right thing because he could have got hurt. And just because he was going so fast. And so we blah, 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 done the thing, rolled back in. I got out one submission. They popped for that. We went about 16 minutes. So the next submission, he comes off the top rope, dragged me, and put me in a submission hold. I tapped. And that's when the people over there, the crowd over there, they will pop when you do something good. And if you give a good performance and a good match and a competitive match, I won't say it doesn't matter if you win or lose, because it sure as hell does, because Sasuke is going to win in his hometown. But if you lose or you get beat and you have that kind of match, man, they will applaud you. Some of them will give you a standing ovation, depending where you're at. So when I finished up that tour, that was maybe the second night for my last date there or something, and they already asked me to come back again in like 2 more months, But and I went 5 times total. I couldn't go when I was in WCW. I think they had their deal with New Japan at that time, and I wasn't in that class of guys that were going. But as soon as WCW, my run there was over, I was right back in Japan within a couple of weeks. I just loved it over there, and I loved the culture. I loved the fans. I loved the way they reacted and respected the business. I loved the matches because they were so competitive, and they had so many good stars over there. And while I was there, I got to see talent exchange sometimes. Some of the guys would go, the FMW guys would come over, 2 or 3 of them for a day or two, and we'd send, or Sasuke would send, a couple guys over to FMW. They'd bring in the girls, like most companies, for like 2 weeks. They'd bring in a couple top girl wrestlers, and they'd travel with us, So it was really cool. Had a nice big tour bus, had my own seat, had a TV, and of course you learn to take your own headphones and your own gimmicks and all that. So, but I loved it over there, and I'd go back again, but not to wrestle, but just to see all these guys, and if I could watch some of the people they've trained through the years and go to some matches, I'd love to do that, man. Just to see where what everyone's doing, but and how much the business changed, I'm sure.
It's good to see that it's still thriving. Professional wrestling, as a whole is still thriving, but the Japan, it's the wrestling there is still, off the charts, with all these different promotions. And, now in the US, you see the exposure. You see all the, you get all this access to, New Japan and Noah and all these different companies that are still putting on incredible, incredible cards.
Yeah. And I just, I was reading an article from the Johnson City newspaper from like I think it's 96, when Smoky Mountain had that last weekend they were shutting down. And one of the last things it said was they were talking about WCW and WWF at the time. Meltzer, someone's talking about that we had been kind of a feeder system, and those kind of things were dying out. These bigger companies were taking over. But then whoever the author was of the article was obviously a Smoky Mountain fan. And they said something along the effect of, and I hear Cornette saying it on his podcast, if not weekly, every couple of weeks. And that is the last article of the article said, as much as you do to try to kill professional wrestling, you can't. It will be back in this area sometime again. Won't be SMW, but you can bet there'll be some shows coming back through this area. And then that was in 90, like I said, 96. And I know people that still run all those same areas. I was in, like I said, a couple of weeks ago, I was in Hazard, Kentucky, one of our regular towns that we did about once every 3 months. And so there's still shows out there. And then, like I said, I thought it was on its deathbed. I really did before COVID. After COVID, I think people just got pissed off about being home and say, I'm going to wrestle. I'm going to run wrestling shows. We're going to get out of the house. And then that's what I did. I said, I'm going to give back to something. If I get off this couch and out of this chair, I'm going to give back to something I care about, and that's professional wrestling. And I knew a school or a camp was around this area. They had asked me to come up and help coach some before. And I said, as soon as this is over, I'm doing that. I'm giving back to something that I care about. But also what I was getting at is I think a lot of people started going, man, we're going to open a company. We're going to run a show. And then like AEW, and I really don't care if you're WWF, AEW, why not be all of them? If you're a wrestling fan, I don't care. I want you to enjoy what you enjoy. But anyway, that gave them competition. Then some of these independent guys started getting picked up, and it's like there's options out there now. And I see and hear about shows all the time. Where I'm at here in Eastern Kentucky, I can travel 2 to 2.5 miles radius in any area and be in Columbus, Ohio, Charleston, West Virginia, Pittsburgh, that's about 4, Lexington, Louisville. I mean, and that's just, and then I go to there's Cincinnati and Cleveland. So, but within 2 to 4 hours, there's so many shows in this area. Even during the weekdays now, sometimes, there's always a Friday, Saturday show. There's shows, professional wrestling shows in this area. and that's without having to go across the country. And I know guys that do that. We bring people in. There's a couple of promoters here. They were in Columbus yesterday. They do these trade shows or conventions, Comic Cons, and Wrestle Cons and things. WrestleCade, I missed it this year. I missed meeting you down there this year.
Yeah, I know.
I went to the third year when they had a Smoky Mountain tribute one, and that was awesome. We had a panel, up one Corny and Dutch and myself and Bobby Fulton, Tracy Smothers, Ricky, Robert. I mean, it was cool. Tom was there, but then I went. Then the last 2 years I went with the camp I'm associated with, the FTC training facility, and we went down, and I didn't get to go this year, but I think that's a great crowd. But there you go, look at the matches they have down there. That's a huge show. Then the next night they have a huge show for the girls, ladies' night out. That's incredible, man.
It is.
And so I'm glad you had a good time.
Thank you. I think it's fair to say that wrestling is booming right now. You got all these different companies, different promotions. It's a great time to be a fan. It's very accessible. It's on cable. It's on streaming. It's everywhere now. So I think wrestling is in good hands, and hopefully it stays that way for years to come. You had talked about.
I agree, and I'm glad you brought that up because there's so many options to watch out there and ways to watch now, and that excites me as a wrestling fan. When I said it was on his deathbed, I really do think so. But I think at one point it just got up off the deathbed and walked out of the ICU, kicked the doors open, and kept on going. And I hope it continues to flourish. And hopefully just keep getting better and better wrestlers and better programming. That's the whole idea and better shows.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
good.
Let's talk about your time in Smoky Mountain. This was in the 90s.
Yes.
And Knoxville, the Southeast, that's another hotbed.
Yep.
For professional wrestling. How did you get started with Smoky Mountain Wrestling?
What's one of them things, I used to travel to Florida. I had to go through Knoxville, and I'd see some of the signs out there, the old Continental and wrestling, and I caught the tail of that. It was on our cable at one point, but so I was aware of how big Knoxville was in the wrestling market. I was in Florida training still. And Tommy Rogers of the Fantastics caught me outside the gym one day, and he said, "Hey, Bobby," he said, "Jim Cornette's opening up a territory. Me and Bobby's been going up there and doing some TVs with them. Aren't you from that area?" And a lot of people think Kentucky and Tennessee are, they border. There's I'm not in that section. Memphis is 8 hours away, but in their mind, it's Kentucky and Tennessee. So he said, "Man, Cornette's opening the territory up there. You ought to try to get him with them." And I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Here, let me give you his number." He gives me Cornette's number. He goes, "Give him a call tonight and tell him I said call." So I was like, okay. And I knew Tommy, by the way. I had worked with him at the school. I didn't know Bobby yet, which I eventually got to know very, very well. But Tommy gave me the number, and he worked out the same gym my brother and I did. And so we'd see him there. Like I said, I was leaving one day, and he caught me there and said, "Hey," really courteous about it. So I go home that evening. It's in February of 92. And I call Jimmy. And he says, "Hey, Bobby, I know who you are." He said, "I'm really busy on the phone. I'll call you back." Well, he never called back. So the next day I ran into Tommy. Tommy had asked how it went. And I told him just what I said. And he goes, "What are you doing tonight about 9 o'clock?" I said, "Nothing. My brother and I, we work out together. We eat together, go to church together, whatever we were doing at that time." I said, I'm usually home. He goes, "Be by the phone at 9. Jimmy will call you." Sure enough, Cornette called me. He had been busy. He's starting TV. Like I said, it's February of 92. And we had a very nice discussion. I sent him some pictures and an old VHS tape that I had, put some music behind and made a little video with, wire this VHS to this, back in the day. So I sent that out to him and said, "We'll be in touch." Fast forward, I was going to be coming home in June to Kentucky on my way to Canada for my second tour up there. I had about a 6-week gap that I was going to be off. So I come back home, and sure enough, Smoky Mountain Wrestling was going to be about an hour from my house. I went up there in person, talked to Jim Cornette, took new picture, took a new video, talked to him, had a real nice talk. And I said, "I'm getting ready to go to Canada. I'll be up there for like 18 weeks. And he goes, well, we're really getting things started here. He said, why don't you stick around and watch the show and see where you might fit in? Well, I'd already talked to Brian Lee and Scott Armstrong and Robert Gibson. I kind of knew him a little bit because they come around here quite a bit back in the day. Rock and Roll did. And so they go, what's Corny got something for you? I said, I don't know. I hope so. I said, I'd love to be in this place. It looks really good. It was good atmosphere. Like I said, an hour from my house. So I go up there and do that. I come back, do some work down in Florida. I go to Australia. I get back from Australia. This is in February, March of '93. So now almost a full year since the first contact has went by. And I'm jet lagged as can be. My brother comes, knocks on my door. He goes, hey, man, you got a phone call? I said, tell him to call back later. I'm out. And they go, no. Get up and answer his call. It's Jim Cornette. I was out of that bed like, I jumped up and flew into the, where the phone was at. And I said, hey, this is Bobby. Jimmy told me to spew. And he goes, how would you like to have a tryout? And I said, I'd love one. He goes, we're going to be in Beckley, West Virginia, which is about 2 hours from me. He said, well, Beckley, West Virginia, next week. It's a Sunday afternoon show. Can you make it? I said, yes, sir. Yes, sir, I can. So the following week, I went to Beckley. I talked to some of the crew. Mark Curtis knew who I was and had seen the video, and he knew I was a Malenko guy. And I talked to Tom. I talked to Jimmy Gold and all these guys that knew Malenko. One knew Boris and one knew Dean. So the good. Everyone knew. So I was welcomed. I was like, that's cool. Well, Jimmy comes to me. And like I said, I already talked to Brian Lee before. Well, he was over in the Hill locker room at this point. Jimmy come to me and said, come here, I want you to meet someone. We go into the bathroom, and there's primetime Brian Lee, and Jimmy goes, hey, he introduced me to him. He goes, this is Brian Lee, our first champion, TV champion. He goes, you have a problem putting him over. And I looked at him, I said, Jimmy, I see 6'8", 300-pound buff. I said, brother, what's your finish? And I just come up from Australia. I had my hair done and was tanned up, was in pretty good shape. I said, whatever you want to do. And he goes, no, you're the heel. You caught a match. My finish is the final countdown. I'll take care of you. I said, okay, see you out there. Went out, had a match, wasn't 2 or 3 moves into it, and Brian Lee starts telling Brian Hildebrand or Mark Curtis, well, this guy needs a job. And I'd lock up and I'd do something. He goes, damn, I dare him to give this guy a job. He was calling, he said, arm driving. And he'd say something, and then Curtis was laughing and going, do this, Bobby, do this. And we just had fun with it and come back. And Sandy Scott come and paid me and blah, blah, blah. Well, about a week went by, and maybe a week and a half, Jim Cornette calls me again. They have a thing called, and that's in March, okay? First week of April, there's a big show called Hillbilly Days in Pikeville, Kentucky, where I was telling you about, where I had that match way back when. It goes full circle. Robert Gibson, him and Bobby, I guess, got up on a basketball goal, the Falls Count Anywhere, and they're going back, and Robert twisted his ankle. Jimmy calls me, tells me what's going on. Robert's hurt. Robert was living in Pensacola at the time too, so he kind of drove a good distance. He goes, I'd like to move. Tim Horner is going to go up there and work with Ricky as the main, and I want you to come in and be our opening match. Had like 5 bookings for me starting the next week. I was like, yes, sir, I'll be there. And I was just doing some substitute teaching at the time. Had some bookings here or there, but so I went up there and done the loop. And the first 4 nights, I was with Tom Pritchard in the first match, 15 minutes with Jim Cornette at ringside. So how good could that get? Because he's talking to my ear going, oh, Dean, how to hold of you, huh? I don't want to be shooting here, Bobby. And he was just messing with me in a good way. And Jimmy would yell out something, come here, feed me. He'd rear back the racket, and he'd go, get out of the way, kid. And he just put me over, talking to me. And anyway, about the 4th night, I guess it was, I might have said before, I'm sitting there, I'm tying my boot. Mark Curtis comes to me. He says, what's your finish, Bobby? And I go, I'll be looking at the lights when I put Doc over out there in the ring. He goes, no, really, what's your finish? And I go, I just told you. He goes, no, Jimmy brought someone in. You're going over tonight in the first match. What's your finish? Well, I had been working on the Northern Lights, but I hadn't really perfected it yet. And I was using a drop kick off the top rope. And I said, drop kick off the top rope. He said, okay. I said, who am I working? He goes, a guy named Mike Sampson. I said, oh, I know Mike. I knew him from Independence. Hell of a good worker, real good body, good man. And I said, yeah, just tell them to watch out for the drop kick and it'll be all good. So I went out there and had again, this is back in Pikeville, Kentucky now. It goes full circle again. Paintsville, Kentucky, rather, where I'd met him in that gym a year before, giving him more stuff. And now he's put me over in a show. And then about middle of the week, he called me and said, hey, Bobby, I really like what you're doing. You want to come in for TV? I went in for TV. They put me a Bobby Eaton. I mean, how good is that? Get to work.
Can't get any better than that.
It doesn't get any better than that. You know, I worked with White Boy. I worked with Dutch, but then I got with Bobby. And when Bobby, I think that's a 3. I could be wrong. I know it's White Boy. Might have been Brian. I'm not sure. It was somewhere in between. But then Bobby Eaton. And so, you know, they did. I think I don't know if they did 3 or 4 tapings, but I was on 1 or 2 of those. Then the next month on one of them. And Jimmy came to me and said, hey, you have any different gear? Because I just had black trunks, black boot with the red laces, red lettering, kind of like the Malenko thing, the lineage thing, what I was doing. And I just so happened I had this kick pads, I had the flames, I had a shirt, everything fired up. I had drawn up and put together. And I said, yeah, I've got this right here. And it's all airbrushed. It's really neat. And he goes, oh, I like it. Wear that from now on. And so I was like, okay. I didn't go back to do a TV. So I wasn't seen for, you know, how Jimmy is, you know, how can I miss you? How can I, you know, his old saying, how can I miss you?
You don't go away. Yeah,
exactly. So I came back to a couple little house shows wearing that. He had put me over and with my gear. And he said, man, Tim Horner came by me one day and said, Bobby, they really like you here. They got an idea for you. And going out again, nothing towards Tim, but I guess that's what he thought. He was kind of running things, and Jim was really, but Jim had already told me, I got an idea for you. And that was the U.S. Junior Heavyweight title run. And he goes, I'm going to bring this guy in to work. And I've been working with Dirty White Boy. I was a no-quit kid. He just beat the snot out of me every night, and I wouldn't get beat. And then he told me, he said, I'm bringing this guy named Chris Candido. And one Sunday in Knoxville, I'm in the back, and here it comes around a corner. Chris Candido, and he hey man, I'm Chris Candido. He's over at work in Memphis. He said, as soon as I finish up over there, I'll be starting with you. I'm really looking forward to it. I've watched some of your matches, and so I think we can do some real fun matches together and stuff. And that's how Chris and I met, and we hit it off. Mm-hmm. Both were young, you know, and athletic, and so Jimmy just, you know, I won this big title up there in Columbus, Ohio, when Bobby Fulton shows. One of them, you know, Fernum Durnham, oh, here's the belt you won, you know, Phantom win, and had a real nice belt. Scott Armstrong had a real nice red, white, blue, belt they used for the junior heavyweight champion. And anyway, started a run right there. And then I started, beat the TV champion. I started being a TV champion, you know, so I had 2 titles. And it just went on, and Jimmy just kept treating me good and put me in good spots, you know. And the pay, I know some guys were making, you know, more of a weekly deal. I had a nightly deal. I was happy with it because I was home probably 5 nights a week if I wanted to be. The whole biggest trip was about 4.5 hours. Sometimes we went to Atlanta or Marietta rather, and that's 8 hours. But most of my trips were like 4 hours. A lot of them were 2, and I could be home right that evening. But the catch was you got to sell gimmicks, pictures. They had the gimmick wars. So I got my nightly pay, and then also, oh, wow, you sell pictures. Because when I was in Canada and Australia and those places, the office kept the money. You know, that was just part of the deal. And anyway, the money, I wasn't getting rich, but I was making pretty good money because of the fans buying your pictures and Polaroids back then and stuff. And it was like my home area. And then a good thing was, if it didn't interfere with your booking, because Jimmy would give you a booking sheet, might have 12 or 16 matches on it for that month. Bobby Fulton started using me. Bobby Fulton, let me back up. Bobby Fulton had originally used me. He called me, and this is right before Cornette's call, because I'd been in Cornette in his ear, like I said. But Bobby had a show a couple hours away from here, and he said, I know who you are through Dean and Tommy, and they speak real highly of you. And would you like to come up for a show? And I did, and I ended up working. If you know anything about Bobby Fulton, he used to work 3 times. He'd work the opening match, get hurt, making a captain's match. Then he'd come back out as a Ninja Turtle or Barney, or he always had some gimmick, in the middle, so save money. I learned later on from Rip Rogers, he got that from at Dallas. You take a crew of about 10 guys and a referee, and everyone works twice. So I worked him in the first match. And I remember he come up to me, so he go, here, lock up. We're in a shower. He goes, lock up with me. In our clothes, of course. And I locked up. He goes, oh, you got a job. I'll see you in the first, third, main event. That's what he said. And I said, okay. And two guys in the locker room started laughing. Said, that's Bobby. Welcome, Bobby Fulton Shows. So I went out in the first match, done a little thing. I screwed him, hit him in the jaw. He complained. I'll see you later on main event. I'm going to get me a partner, blah, blah, blah. He came back out, had to wrestle a Ninja Turtle. Okay, boom, boom. Make him, then come back in a main event. And I got $75. And like I said, about maybe 3 hours from home or something. And he called me on that Monday, and he said, hey, Bobby, a couple of them guys are getting ready to leave. Would you want to come up here regular? And I said, yeah. I said, Bobby, I said, sorry, I'm not the country or county idiot or whatever. I said, bro, I can't make it that far for $75. I said, oh, no, I've already got you. I'll give you $100. And if it's better, I'll give you more if you'll work with me if it's not good. Can we agree on 100? I said, yeah, that's, very reasonable. Plus, he said, I'll tell you this, that show the other night was one of my furthest ones. Most of them are going to be right below Columbus where you're at. So you'll be even closer. And I said, that sounds great. But then I tried out for Smoky Mountain based off of that match. Really, Bobby, helped me get in and put the bug in Corny's ear. So then, point being, once I that Smoky Mountain had those 15, 16 bookings, well, I might only have 12 of them. But if there was a day that, say, a county fair was around in the summertime, Bobby had a lot of county fairs back then, and he had about 3 towns he ran pretty regular. If I was off, I could go up there and work for him. So I was staying booked 5 to 7 days a week, and, making about $100 for Bobby. But on Cornish shows, I was getting the 75, but I was getting the all the picture money and stuff. Until one day Jimmy says, "Hey, I'm bumping you up about 25," and so I was good with that, man, and yeah. I was glad to be there, the morale was right, man. Had everything from young guys to veterans. It was and we had good TV coverage, and the fans were great. The fans loved that kind of wrestling, especially our audience. We catered to that, the mountains, man. That's Appalachian and Smoky Mountain Wrestling's all through there, and the people up here seeing it on TV, like I said earlier, man, they just ate it up.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like you've had such an incredible career. Got to work in different companies, wrestle in different towns. I want to talk about some of the stuff you've done outside of wrestling. I know you've been very involved with a lot of charity work and done stuff to help out in your community. What kinds of things have you done to, make a difference in your community?
I'd like to think I make a difference in a positive way. One is working I call it the wrestling camp. It's a wrestling school. It's in Ironton, Ohio. And they do a lot of shows, and I get to help a lot of young people out on those shows, teaching, coaching, lead them through some of the shows, giving them positive feedback on their matches after the shows, stuff like that. I've worked in an after-school program, like an after-school principal. It was lights out after dark, like a cool camp that they used the schools as a local community center, if you will, and the students that stayed after, for a couple hours, got a snack and got help with their homework, and then they had physical activities and things like that. What I'm doing more now is working. I work some with the veterans, especially Vietnam veterans. I'm close friends with several of those, and sadly, a couple have passed away in the last 3 years. 6 years ago, I lost one of my buddies, and then in the last 3 years, I lost an uncle, 2 uncles, and another gentleman living in his hometown. Yes, and there's that age when the Vietnam War was ending, I was becoming very mature, like in '75. Aware of things. So that's probably why that resonates with me so much. And so the 14th, I'm going to be doing wreaths across America with where you go out. It's all across the United States. They've got wreaths for all the veterans. And they take a section. If it's not a veteran cemetery, they take a section that has where the veterans are at. You got boxes and boxes of wreaths, and they represent the Army, Navy, Marine, every branch. They have a service, and it's really great. And then you go over and you take a wreath for Christmas, and you don't want these men and women that served and made the greatest sacrifice of all for our great country, you place a wreath on their grave. And if you are a veteran, you salute and say their name. And if you're a civilian, you put your hand on your heart and you repeat their names. For example, one of my friends, I lost James Oliver, and I would say, I put my wreath down and I say James Oliver. So his name lives on. And they have that all across the country. That's on the 14th. Most of them start around noontime. You just have to check your local area and cemetery. I go to a cemetery. There's one in Kentucky, just about 20 miles away. It's a Korean War Memorial they have down there for the veterans. But I go to a bigger one over in Ironton, Ohio, because that's really close to me. And also where my brother, he's a chaplain for hospice, and that's the one they worked with. And so I've just been going there. Now, as of last year, there's one right here in my hometown, and I'm 2 miles from the cemetery. But again, this year I probably will not go. I'll go to the one I'm more used to and more established. But I encourage anyone to look up, Wreaths Across America. The organization is great, giving back to that. And I believe in, giving back to your community. If I do like a county fair and people know who I am, and I have an opportunity to say something positive about our area, stuff like that. Like I said, positivity is where it's at, man. Just showing the love, kindness, having gratitude. Those things to me are very important. When I walk out of the house, I have about 5 things in my mind that I'll go out there. I won't now because it's been sub temperatures here, crazy, but I'll sit in my chair in the sun and I'll say, okay, today I choose love. Today I choose kindness. Today I choose gratitude, acceptance, forgiveness, whatever that is. And I try to have that kind of day. Was I kind to someone today? Did I show love to someone today? Those type things, gratitude. And this is me. I mean, how blessed are we that we're talking right now like this? But I imagine, to me, I say this: I had a roof over my head, a bed to sleep in. I woke up. I have clean water to drink and bathe in if I desire. I have food. I have warmth in this cold. I'm blessed. So I have to have gratitude for that and be thankful. Be thankful for whatever you have. I have a hoodie on right now. Keep them warm. I have a jacket if I want to put that on. I mean, those sometimes are so little, but you don't even think about. Oh yeah, I'm drinking a bottle of water. Okay, we've got clean water to drink and take and bathe in if we want to. Some people in this world don't have that luxury, So hopefully that answers your question. Always give back. I have a thing that's on my Instagram at Bobby Blaze. I'm not on Facebook. I'll give you a plug real quick. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, Bobby Blaze 744. And a lot of those things I do on it is pay it forward. And I've put a silly stuff on about paying it forward. I'm big on that. And like wrestling, I've helped a couple of younger students that couldn't afford to come to the camp. Okay, you just, give them a couple dollars here. I'll do a little thing on my PayPal and say, hey, you want to help this girl get some knee pads? You want to help pay for some lunches or gym membership? And I'd take them and like down at Planet Fitness, and I say, put these 2 for the next month, and because someone done that, I'm paying it forward to them. I hope they will take that and do it for someone one day too, because there's so many. I gave a guy a ride the other day to a gym. I very seldom do that, but he needed one. Was on the way, and I don't mean it that way. I very seldom do that. I just go to a different gym, but we decided to partner up. And I'm like telling him, he goes, "You went out of your way over here to pick me up to this gym. Why?" And I said, "Because you wouldn't believe how many times someone has come to my house and picked me up and take me to the gym to work out, or took me to Malenko's to train that day." There was a guy named Julio Jumbo Beretta. I mentioned Sean Waltman earlier. Sometimes he just come by the apartment, and I was delivering pizzas, for Domino's, and trying to make money to pay for my lessons. And anyway, he'd come by and say, "Come on, guys, we're at a Chinese restaurant right near the apartment." Took and bought us buffet. We'll be starving to death, eating out of the 7-Eleven or something. But he said, so I tell people how many times someone's bought my lunch. So these young people, one girl was like 21. I think the guy's 25. And I was trying to help them out a couple of summers ago. Like, I got lunch. Someone had blessed me with something. I'm not rich or anything, but maybe someone slipped me a 20. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to pay this forward. And that goes on a lot when people know you're helping other people. It's like, don't say anything about this. And they give you $25, and I say, you know what? I'm going to put this I'm gonna get 2 people memberships this month, stuff like that. I'm big on that, and gratitude and paying it forward are 2 biggest things. And of course, that all falls under love, man, love and kindness.
What is it about giving back to you that gives you the most joy?
Oh man, knowing where I came from, knowing I had nothing, knowing that, like I said, I went from living in a city where both my maternal, my both my grandmothers lived in and my aunts lived in before my one grandmother retired and did come back to Kentucky. That basically had a single mom raising me and my little brother, and living in downtown in Ashton, Kentucky. And my mom passed away 12 years ago, and I asked her on her deathbed, and I kind of knew this. She's told me, but it wasn't a deathbed confession. I said, Mom, we could have went back to Baltimore. Both grandparents were there. Your mom was there. Why didn't we go back? And we took trips back to Baltimore when we could, Christmas or whenever she could afford it, or someone to take care of us and get us up there. But she said, because I was a single mother in the 70s, and divorce, looked upon differently. Single mother were looked upon differently. And she goes, I wanted to prove that I could do it. I wanted to take you and your brother, and we come off welfare, food stamps, this and that. She goes, I knew I was going to make it on my own for you 2 boys. And that's what she did. And I got crying, what she's telling me is, plus she get ready to pass away within a week or so of that time. She was still very, aware of everything going on. She was under hospice care. But anyway, it's one of them things like, I know what it's like to be on the other side. And right now, I tell you something you can be doing too, is the shelters, the red kettle drive. I put $1 in them every chance I can, man. I tell my little granddaughter, here, Lucy, go put $1 in that, the red kettles. Salvation Army, you know what I'm saying? Help them people out, because most of that money stays in your area. And you see some of these companies that are out for fundraising, and CEOs and all these top people make so much money, it trickles down to where the volunteer and where you're donated to is such a small amount. Well, the thing about that is most of the money, those people make good salary stuff, but most of the money is given, goes out to the community. So I really like that. And so help the Salvation Army out anytime you can, and then, sometimes I don't like giving money to homeless people, because we got a scam going on around here, and they're not really homeless. It's a bunch of people work together, because I am aware of where the homeless is. And we have a lot of homeless people in this area. And they have people and organizations that help take care of the homeless, and they're not the ones out there begging. So if you know someone that for sure is homeless, sure, help them out, But I tell you, I do a thing, and it's just me. I look at the person's shoes. If they got a pair of nice Nike shoes on, I'm like, they're not homeless, it's a gimmick, because it's been written in the newspaper. They've got signs up, don't feed the animals, basically. I hate to say that, but it's a scam. They're not really homeless. So, but sure, there are homeless families that need help. There's people lose stuff in fires. If you have clothes and toys for kids or anything like that, go down like the Christmas tree at your mall, your local mall. I'm sure your town, like many others, has that tree. It has a kid's name on it. It'll be a boy, age 10. He likes trains or whatever it is. And you take one of those, you spend $20 and stick it down there. They'll wrap it for you, put it there for that kid, send it out to his school, however they do that. And the shoebox, I love that program where you just donate to a local church. They put stuff in the shoebox. Shoebox Ministries, I guess it's called. I'm drawing a blank on their actual name, but I think and they send packages out all over the world, man. I think that's another great thing, because there are boys and girls that our kids have pencils and pens and notebooks and things, scissors to use, and they put out toothbrushes, things you wouldn't think of for men, just a razor, which I hadn't shaved this morning, but just saying, like, that's a luxury we have. Some people don't. And someone in another country opens that up and says, wow, man, I got pencils to write with or color with, or a grown man says, oh, I can shave today. I got a brand new razor in that box, So anyway, anything you can do to help someone else out, I'm all for it, man. And again, I just say pay it forward. That kind of covers it all. I think when you put love out there, I just throw it out there. I got out of the car one day at the store up here. This other gentleman I know used to play basketball. He's a couple years older than me, and we were talking around. And he said, Bobby, man, how you doing? He goes, you just come in, people just flock around you and talk to you. And some of them they do. It's just not because of the wrestling. I just draw them. I said, Charlie, you know what I do? I said, brother, I just put love out there. I said, every day I get up and I give. I said, I don't expect anything in return. I said, but you'd be surprised what comes back to me. And I said, I don't do it for that, but that's just the way the world works. And I said, so I'm putting a good karma out there, brother. I'm putting love, karma, what do you want to call it? I'm putting it out there because I know how good it makes me feel inside. And every good thing that's ever really happened good to me is a direct result of me helping someone else. All of a sudden, someone comes and helps me with something I didn't even know I was going to have a problem with. And it's weird, but it works that way for me. And I just put the love and the kindness out there, and whatever happens, happens. Because I don't want to put any hate, negativity, nastiness. I don't want that, man. I'm at a point in my life, man, where I want some love, some kindness, have some gratitude, and pay it forward and keep on living. No, hope that answers your question.
That's what it's all about, paying it forward and helping out other people that need it the most.
Yes.
Bobby, this has been wonderful getting the chance to speak with you. It means a lot to me and to my listeners and viewers that are watching this on YouTube. I want to say thank you for coming on to Wrestling with Heart. You had plugged it earlier, but in case people didn't listen and watch before, where can people find you on social media?
Yes, on social media, I'm on Instagram and Twitter, Bobby Blaze 744. 7 football number, 44 my basketball number, Bobby Blaze 744. My books are available for Amazon. Just go on Amazon. It's under Bobby Blaze or Bobby Blaze Medley. The account's there. You can get them now. I got my first book was Pin Me, Pay Me, Have Boots for Travel. The second book is I kicked out on 2, The Educational Wrestler. And they're both available. I think they're $15 right now, free with Prime shipping, of course. But again, or just get a hold of me, and I'd love to hear from everyone. Just DM me if you want, either my Instagram or my Twitter, and say I heard you on the Wrestling with Heart program. And if you order a book and you run into me somewhere down the line at a WrestleCade or somewhere, I never charge for an autograph. So if you have an item of mine, unless the promoter, that's the requirement. But if you already bought my book, you're not having to pay for an autograph. I'll personalize and autograph it for you too if you already got one. I doubt that I'll be sending any out this year. It's getting, to me, it's kind of late in the year to be doing that. But I would try to, and I do have some on hand. But anyway, thank you so much for your time, man.
Absolutely.
I know we had a little conflict on times and things and dates. I was so looking forward to getting up with you, but everything's for a reason. And once I saw you at the WrestleCade in your picture, I was like, man, I wanted to be on that show even more, man, because I saw you interacting with so many people that I'm familiar with or have contact with. And that just does my heart good when I see people doing good like that and doing something they love. So best of luck with this, man. I love it. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Once we get everything, once we get this out, feel free to share it with your followers and everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just if you tag me on one of those, I will definitely get it out there because the power of social media, man. Let's get them numbers up.
Let's
get
do
some
it.
eyes on this program. I love that. That's the right way, brother.
Absolutely.
Right.
Thanks again, and you're more than welcome to come back.
My pleasure. I look forward to it soon.
All right. Take care.
Yes, sir.
This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.